Tom Reynolds was a man who had learned to live life one day at a time. A single father of 2 young children, he carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders every waking moment. His days started early and ended late, filled with the hum of engines, the clanking of tools, and the endless chatter of his kids. He worked as a mechanic at a small garage in the heart of their quiet town, but even after hours, he often found himself tinkering with old cars people brought him for side jobs. It wasn't just about making ends meet, it was about giving his kids the life they deserved. On this particular evening, Tom was driving home after a long shift. The sky was overcast, heavy with clouds that promised rain. The air smelled damp, and the wind whipped through the cracks in his old truck's windows. He was exhausted, both physically and mentally. His mind wandered to the pile of bills waiting for him on the kitchen table and the leaky roof he needed to fix before winter arrived. But more than anything, he thought about his kids, Sophie, who was 8, and Jake, who was 6. They were his reason for pushing forward no matter how tough things got. As he turned onto the main road leading out of town, something caught his eye. By the side of the road, under the flickering glow of a street lamp, stood a woman. She was bent over the hood of her car, her hands gripping the edges tightly. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face from the drizzle that had begun to fall, and she looked utterly helpless. Every few seconds, she straightened up and waved frantically at passing cars, hoping someone would stop, but most drivers either didn't notice her or chose to ignore her plight. Tom hesitated for a moment. He was tired, soaked to the bone, and eager to get home to his kids. Stopping meant delaying dinner, bedtime routines, and the little bit of peace he could snatch before collapsing into bed. Yet, as he glanced at the woman again, he couldn't shake the feeling that he should help. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be stranded, or maybe it was simply because he believed in doing the right thing, even when it wasn't convenient. With a sigh, he slowed down and pulled over behind her car. Grabbing his flashlight and a rag from the passenger seat, he stepped out into the chilly night. "Need some help?" he called out, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the sound of the rain. The woman turned around, relief washing over her face. "Oh, thank goodness," she exclaimed, rushing toward him. "I've been stuck here for nearly an hour. No one else has stopped." Tom gave her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry. Let's see what we're dealing with." He walked over to the car and popped the hood. The engine bay was a mess, wires tangled, oil stains everywhere. But Tom's trained eyes quickly scanned the components. After a few moments of inspection, he spotted the problem. "Looks like your alternator's gone bad," he said, turning to face her. "It's not going to start until we replace it." The woman sighed deeply, running a hand through her wet hair. "Of course it is," she muttered, shaking her head. Then, looking embarrassed, she added, "I'm sorry, I don't even know your name." "I'm Emily Carter." "Tom Reynolds," he replied, offering a firm handshake. "And don't apologize. Stuff like this happens all the time. Lucky for you, I've got my tools in the truck." Emily smiled weakly, though there was a glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. "You're a lifesaver, Tom. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stopped." As Tom retrieved his toolbox from the back of his truck, Emily leaned against her car watching him work. Despite the dreary weather, there was something comforting about the way he moved with confidence and purpose. He explained each step as he went along, pointing out the damaged parts and showing her how they contributed to the car's failure. Though she didn't understand much of the technical jargon, she appreciated his effort to keep her informed. "So, are you new around here?" Tom asked casually, trying to make conversation while he worked. "Yes, actually," Emily replied. "I just moved to town last month. I'm a teacher at Lincoln Elementary. It's been a big change, but I think I'll like it here." Tom nodded, tightening a bolt with practiced ease. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. This place may not be flashy, but it's got good people." They continued talking as Tom worked, sharing bits and pieces of their lives. Emily mentioned that she'd left her previous job and her marriage behind in another state, seeking a fresh start. She didn't go into detail, but Tom could sense the pain beneath her words. In turn, he told her about his own struggles as a single dad since losing his wife 3 years ago. There was no pity in his tone, only resilience and determination. By the time Tom finished repairing the alternator, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag and closed the hood with a satisfied thud. "There you go," he said, grinning. "She should run just fine now." Emily's eyes lit up with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough, Tom. How much do I owe you?" Tom shook his head firmly. "Nothing. Just glad I could help." But Emily wasn't having it. She insisted on paying him, arguing that he'd gone out of his way to assist her. Finally, Tom relented, accepting only enough to cover the cost of the replacement part. As he packed up his tools, Emily handed him a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, please let me know. You've done so much for me tonight." Tom tucked the card into his pocket and gave her a polite nod. "Take care, Emily. Drive safe." As he climbed back into his truck and drove away, Tom couldn't help but feel a strange warmth in his chest. It wasn't just the satisfaction of helping someone in need. It was the connection they'd shared, however brief. Little did he know, that rainy evening marked the beginning of something extraordinary, a series of events that would alter the course of his life forever. The week following the rainy night passed quickly for Tom, filled with the usual hustle of work, parenting, and household chores. He didn't think much about Emily after their brief encounter. After all, he'd only been doing what he always did, helping someone in need. But deep down, there was a lingering impression of her kindness and gratitude, a small flicker of warmth that stayed tucked away in his mind. Then, one sunny afternoon, as Tom was elbow-deep in grease under the hood of an old sedan at the garage, the bell above the shop door jingled. He glanced up, expecting to see another customer or perhaps his boss dropping by. Instead, he saw Emily walking in, carrying a large brown paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and vanilla. Her presence took him by surprise, and for a moment, he froze, unsure how to react. "Hi, Tom," she said with a warm smile, holding up the bag. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to stop by and say thank you again for the other night. You really saved me." Tom wiped his hands on a rag and stepped forward, feeling a mix of embarrassment and pride. "Oh, hey, Emily, no problem at all, just glad I could help." She placed the bag on the counter near the register, revealing its contents, a dozen freshly baked cookies still slightly warm. "These are for you and your team here at the garage. I figured it was the least I could do." Tom chuckled softly, scratching the back of his neck. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble. Really, it's part of the job." Emily shook her head, her expression earnest. "Maybe so, but not everyone would have stopped on a night like that. I'll never forget how kind you were. And besides—" She hesitated, then added with a playful grin, "I heard from some of the guys around town that you're the best mechanic in these parts. So maybe I'll need your expertise again someday." Her words brought a genuine smile to Tom's face. There was something about her sincerity that made him feel seen, appreciated in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. They chatted for a few minutes, exchanging pleasantries about the weather and the town. Eventually, Emily asked if he had time for a quick coffee break. "I mean, only if you're not too busy," she added quickly, looking slightly nervous. Tom glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearing lunchtime, and he knew the morning rush was over. Plus, his stomach had been growling for the past hour. Anyway, "Sure, why not?" he replied, grabbing his jacket from the hook near the door. "Let me just tell my coworker I'll be stepping out for a bit." They walked together to a small cafe a block away, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other's names. The air inside was cozy, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and buttery pastries. They ordered their drinks, black coffee for Tom, a latte for Emily, and found a quiet corner table near the window. As they sipped their coffees, the conversation flowed naturally. Emily talked about her new teaching job, describing the challenges and joys of working with young students. "It's such a rewarding career," she said, her eyes lighting up. "But adjusting to a new school has been tough. Still, I love it here already." Tom nodded, listening intently. When it was his turn to speak, he opened up about his own life, the struggles of being a single dad, the sacrifices he made daily to provide for Sophie and Jake, and the void left behind after losing his wife. He didn't usually share these things with strangers, but there was something about Emily that made him feel comfortable, like he could trust her. "I can't imagine how hard that must have been," Emily said softly, her voice tinged with empathy. "You're doing an amazing job, Tom. Your kids are lucky to have you." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For years, Tom had felt like he was barely keeping his head above water, constantly questioning whether he was enough for his children. Hearing someone else acknowledge his efforts meant more than he cared to admit. Before leaving the cafe, Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table toward him, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Please don't take this the wrong way," she began, her tone hesitant. I wanted to repay you properly. For everything you did. This is for the alternator and maybe a little extra for your time." Tom stared at the envelope, torn between gratitude and discomfort. He picked it up and peeked inside, his eyes widening at the amount of cash. "Emily, this is way too much," he protested, pushing it back toward her. "I can't accept this." "But," Emily refused to back down. "Yes, you can," she insisted firmly. "Consider it a gift, Tom, please. I wouldn't feel right otherwise." After several moments of polite argument, Tom finally relented, tucking the envelope into his pocket with a sigh. "All right, fine. But only because you won't let me say no," he joked, earning a laugh from Emily. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Emily promised to visit the garage again soon. "Take care, Tom," she said with a wave, her smile lingering in his mind long after she disappeared down the street. That evening, as Tom sat at the kitchen table counting the bills from the envelope, he realized just how much Emily's gesture would ease the burden he'd been carrying. It wasn't just the financial relief. It was the reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how small, could ripple outward in unexpected ways. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a connection that would grow stronger with each passing day, weaving itself into the fabric of his life in ways he couldn't yet foresee. Over the next few weeks, Emily became a familiar face at the garage. At first, her visits were sporadic. She'd stop by once or twice to check on Tom, bringing snacks or homemade treats for him and his coworkers. But as time went on, her presence grew more consistent, almost routine. She'd arrive in the late morning just as the initial rush of customers began to taper off, and linger for an hour or two, chatting with Tom whenever he had a break. Her visits weren't intrusive. Instead, they felt like a natural extension of their budding friendship. Tom found himself looking forward to these moments. The garage could be chaotic, filled with the clanging of tools, the roar of engines, and the occasional gruff complaint from a frustrated customer. But when Emily walked in, everything seemed to quiet down, if only for a little while. She had a calming effect on him, her laughter light and genuine, her questions thoughtful and sincere. They talked about everything: books, music, movies, and even the quirks of small-town life. It was during these conversations that Tom realized how much he enjoyed her company. There was something about her that made the weight of his responsibilities feel lighter, even if just for a short time. Their bond deepened further when Emily began spending time with Tom's kids. Sophie and Jake were initially shy around her, but Emily's warmth quickly won them over. One Saturday afternoon, she showed up at the garage with a bag of board games and invited the family to join her at the park. Tom hesitated at first, unsure whether it was appropriate to include her in their family outings. But Sophie and Jake were so excited by the idea that he couldn't say no. The park visit turned out to be a delightful success. Emily played tag with the kids, helped them build sandcastles, and even joined in a spirited game of hide-and-seek. By the end of the day, Sophie was clinging to Emily's arm, chattering excitedly about school, while Jake proudly showed off his collection of toy cars. Watching them interact, Tom felt a pang of gratitude. And something else. Something he couldn't quite put into words. For the first time since his wife passed away, he saw someone stepping into the role she had left behind, not as a replacement, but as a companion who brought joy and stability to their lives. As the weeks turned into months, Emily became an integral part of their routine. On evenings when Tom worked late, she volunteered to babysit Sophie and Jake, helping them with homework or reading bedtime stories. She never asked for anything in return, simply saying, "It's my pleasure." Her kindness didn't go unnoticed. The kids adored her, often asking when Miss Emily would come over again. Even Tom's neighbors started commenting on how nice it was to see him smile more often, attributing it to Emily's influence. For Emily, being part of Tom's family was healing in ways she hadn't anticipated. Moving to this town had been a leap of faith, a desperate attempt to escape the toxic relationship she'd endured for years. Her ex-husband had controlled every aspect of her life, isolating her from friends and family until she felt completely alone. But here, surrounded by Tom's warmth and his children's laughter, she found herself slowly letting go of the fear that had haunted her for so long. She wasn't just building a new life. She was rediscovering parts of herself she thought were lost forever. Despite the growing connection between them, neither Tom nor Emily dared to voice the feelings simmering beneath the surface. Both were cautious, aware of the complexities that came with opening their hearts again. For Tom, the pain of losing his wife still lingered, and he worried about introducing someone new into his kids' lives, only to have things fall apart later. As for Emily, her past relationship had left scars that ran deep, making her hesitant to trust fully. So they kept their interactions platonic, focusing on the friendship that had blossomed naturally. But there were moments, small, fleeting, glimpses that hinted at something more. Like the time Emily stayed late at the garage one evening, helping Tom clean up after a particularly busy day. As they stood side by side washing grease-stained rags, their hands accidentally brushed against each other. They both froze for a split second, exchanging a glance that spoke volumes before quickly looking away. Or the night she came over to help with dinner, and Tom caught her humming softly as she stirred the pot. He watched her for a moment longer than necessary, struck by how effortlessly she fit into their home. These moments weren't lost on Sophie and Jake either. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Sophie turned to her dad with a mischievous grin. "Daddy, do you like Miss Emily?" she asked innocently. Tom nearly dropped the book he was holding. "What makes you say that?" he replied, trying to keep his tone light. Sophie shrugged. "She's really nice. And she makes you laugh lot." Jake chimed in from his bed, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Yeah, Daddy. Can Miss Emily be our new mom?" Tom chuckled nervously, ruffling Jake's hair. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? Miss Emily is just a friend." But as he tucked them in and turned off the light, he couldn't shake the question from his mind. Did he like Emily? Of course he did. She was kind, intelligent, and incredibly patient with his kids. But liking someone and allowing yourself to care for them were two very different things. Love, especially after loss, required vulnerability, a willingness to risk heartache all over again. And Tom wasn't sure he was ready for that. Unbeknownst to him, Emily was grappling with similar thoughts. She admired Tom deeply, not just for his strength as a single father, but for the way he carried himself with quiet dignity. He was the kind of man who inspired trust, who made you believe in the goodness of people again. Yet, every time she considered taking a step closer, doubts crept in. What if she wasn't ready? What if she wasn't enough? Despite their reservations, the bond between them continued to grow, strengthened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They supported each other through life's ups and downs, finding comfort in the familiarity of their connection. Whether it was Emily cheering Tom on as he tackled yet another car repair, or Tom offering a listening ear when Emily needed to vent about work, they leaned on each other in ways that felt natural and effortless, and so, their friendship flourished, becoming a source of light in both their lives. Neither knew what the future held, but for now they were content to take things one day at a time. After all, sometimes the most meaningful relationships aren't built overnight. They're nurtured, slowly, brick by brick, until they form a foundation strong enough to withstand whatever comes next. It was a cold, dark night when Tom's phone buzzed on the passenger seat of his truck. He had just finished a long shift at the garage and was halfway home, navigating the winding roads that led out of town. The call came in as he approached, a stretch of highway lined with dense trees, their skeletal branches swaying ominously in the wind. At first he considered ignoring it. After all, it was late and he was exhausted. But something about the persistent vibration made him glance down. The name flashing on the screen stopped him cold. Emily. His heart skipped a beat. Emily rarely called him this late, and when she did, it was usually to ask about car trouble or share some light-hearted story about her day. This time, though, her tone was unmistakably frantic. "Tom?" Her voice trembled, barely audible over the crackling line. I need your help. Please, can you come over? It's urgent." Alarm bells rang in Tom's mind. "Emily, what's wrong? Are you okay?" There was a pause, followed by a shaky breath. "He's here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My ex, he found me. He's outside my apartment and he won't leave. I don't know what to do." Tom's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His stomach churned with a mix of anger and fear. Over the weeks they'd spent together, Emily had shared bits and pieces of her past, the controlling relationship, the abuse, the restraining order she'd fought so hard to secure. But hearing her voice now, raw with terror, brought the reality of her situation crashing down on him. "I'm on my way," he said firmly, turning the truck around without hesitation. "Stay safe, Emily. Don't open the door for anyone, okay? Just stay inside and lock everything." "I will," she replied, her voice trembling. "Hurry, please." The drive to Emily's apartment felt like an eternity. Tom's mind raced, with worst-case scenarios, each one worse than the last. What if her ex tried to break in? What if he hurt her? He clenched his jaw, pushing the accelerator harder as the rain began to fall in steady sheets. By the time he reached her building, his clothes were damp from the storm, but he didn't care. All that mattered was getting to her. When he arrived, the scene outside her apartment was chaotic. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, and visibly agitated, was pacing back and forth near Emily's door. His fists were clenched, and he was shouting, loudly enough for Tom to hear even before stepping out of the truck. "You can't hide forever, Emily," the man bellowed, slamming his palm against the doorframe. "Open up or I'll break it down." Tom's blood boiled. Without thinking twice, he strode toward the commotion, his boots splashing through puddles. "Hey!" he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. "What's going on here?" The man turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Tom's appearance. "Who the hell are you?" he spat, taking a step forward. "I'm a friend of Emily's," Tom replied, standing his ground despite the knot of tension in his chest. "And unless you want trouble, I suggest you leave right now." For a moment, the man hesitated, sizing Tom up. Then, with a sneer, he stepped closer, invading Tom's personal space. "This doesn't concern you," he growled. "Stay out of it." Tom refused to back down. He planted his feet firmly, his voice unwavering. "Actually, it does concern me. You're trespassing, and Emily doesn't want you here. So I'm asking nicely. Walk away while you still can." The standoff grew tense, the air thick with hostility. Just as Tom feared things might escalate further, a neighbor emerged from his unit, a retired police officer named Mr. Harris, who lived a few doors down. Seeing the confrontation, he quickly intervened, flashing his badge and demanding to know what was happening. "This guy's harassing my tenant," Mr. Harris said sternly, pointing at Emily's ex. "I've already called the authorities. They'll be here any minute." The mention of law enforcement seemed to pierce through the man's bravado. With a final glare at Tom, he muttered a string of curses under his breath and stormed off. Into the night. Only then did Tom allow himself to exhale, the adrenaline coursing through his veins beginning to subside. Moments later, Emily opened her door, tears streaming down her face. She threw her arms around Tom, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you," she choked out, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I was so scared." Tom held her tightly, rubbing her back in soothing circles. "You're safe now," he murmured, his own voice thick with emotion. "I'm not letting anything happen to you." As they waited for the police to arrive, Emily explained how her ex had tracked her down despite the restraining order. He'd shown up unannounced earlier that evening, demanding to see her and refusing to leave. Terrified, she had locked herself inside and called Tom, knowing he was the only person she could count on. When the officers finally arrived, they took detailed statements from both Emily and Tom. They assured her that her ex would face severe consequences for violating the restraining order and encouraged her to press charges. By the time everything was settled, it was well past midnight. Back inside her apartment, Emily sank onto the couch, visibly shaken. Tom sat beside her, handing her a cup of tea he'd brewed in an attempt to calm her nerves. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. Finally, Emily broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was safe here," she admitted, staring into the steaming mug in her hands. "But no matter where I go, he always finds me. I feel like I'll never escape." Tom reached out, placing a gentle hand on hers. "You're stronger than you think, Emily, and you're not alone anymore. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." Her eyes met his, glistening with tears. "Why are you doing this, Tom? After everything you've been through yourself, why would you risk so much for someone like me?" Tom hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I care about you," he said simply, his voice steady. "And because no one deserves to live in fear. Not you, not anyone." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Emily looked at him, her expression softening. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Neither of them said anything more after that, but the weight of their unspoken feelings lingered. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the aftermath of chaos, something shifted between them. The walls they had built around their hearts began to crumble brick by brick until all that remained was the undeniable truth. They needed each other, perhaps more than either had realized. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale golden light through the windows, Tom stayed by Emily's side, vowing silently to stand by her no matter what challenges lay ahead. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. In the weeks following the incident with Emily's ex, life began to settle into a new rhythm for both her and Tom. The authorities had acted swiftly, arresting her ex-husband and filing multiple charges against him for violating the restraining order, trespassing, and harassment. With legal support from a local advocacy group, Emily felt a renewed sense of security, something she hadn't experienced in years. Knowing that justice was finally within reach gave her the courage to start envisioning a future free from fear. For Tom, the experience had been transformative. Protecting Emily wasn't just about stepping up as a friend. It was about honoring the values he held dear: kindness, integrity, and standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. But more than anything, it solidified the bond between them. In the aftermath of that terrifying night, their relationship evolved in ways neither had anticipated. What began as friendship now carried an undeniable undercurrent of deeper emotions, ones they could no longer ignore. One crisp autumn evening, after putting Sophie and Jake to bed, Tom found himself sitting on the porch steps, staring at the stars scattered across the sky. The cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the world felt quiet, almost peaceful. He was lost in thought when Emily appeared, carrying 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. She handed one to him with a soft smile before settling beside him on the steps. "Thanks," Tom said, taking a sip. "This hits the spot." Emily nodded, wrapping her hands around her mug. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then, almost hesitantly, Emily spoke. "Tom, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about us." Tom turned to look at her, his heart skipping a beat. "Yeah?" She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "You've done so much for me, not just the other night, but all along. You've been there for me in ways I never expected anyone to be, and I don't know where I'd be without you." Her voice softened. "But I also know what it must have cost you to step into something like that. to put yourself in harm's way for me. I'll never forget it." Tom shook his head, his expression earnest. "Emily, you don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would have done." "No," she interrupted gently but firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You went above and beyond because you care, and not just about me, but about my well-being, my safety, my happiness. That means everything to me." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Tom felt a lump rise in his throat, unsure how to respond. Finally, he admitted, "I care about you, Emily, more than I ever thought possible. But I'm scared too. Scared of messing things up, of letting you or the kids down, losing someone you love. It changes you." Emily reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I understand, Tom, believe me, I do. After everything I've been through, I'm scared too, but maybe we can face it together, one step at a time." Her touch sent a warmth coursing through him, melting away some of the walls he'd built around his heart. Looking into her eyes, he saw not just vulnerability, but strength, a resilience that mirrored his own. It dawned on him then. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect or waiting for the perfect moment. It was about choosing to walk alongside someone, flaws and all, and building something beautiful despite the challenges. With a tentative smile, Tom leaned closer. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's take it one step at a time." That simple agreement marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Over the next few months, Tom and Emily grew closer, navigating their budding romance with patience and care. They spent weekends hiking in the nearby woods, sharing stories around a campfire, or simply enjoying lazy Sunday mornings over pancakes. Sophie and Jake adored having Emily around, often begging her to stay for dinner or join them on family outings. To them, she wasn't just Miss Emily anymore. She was becoming a part of their everyday lives. For Tom, seeing his kids light up around Emily filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. There were still moments of doubt, of course, times when old fears crept in, reminding him of the risks that came with opening his heart again. But every time he looked at Emily, laughing with his children or helping him fix a stubborn leak, in the kitchen sink those doubts faded. She wasn't trying to replace his late wife. Instead, she was creating her own unique place in their family, one filled with laughter, kindness, and unconditional support. As for Emily, being part of Tom's family gave her a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Teaching at Lincoln Elementary brought its own joys and challenges, but coming home to Tom and the kids made even the toughest days worthwhile. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not as a victim of her past, but as a woman, capable of love, growth, and happiness. By spring, their connection had deepened to the point where neither could imagine life without the other. On a sunny afternoon during a picnic in the park, Tom decided it was time to say what had been in his heart for months. As they sat together beneath the shade of a towering oak tree, watching Sophie and Jake chase each other through the grass, he turned to Emily. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "When I met you that rainy night on the side of the road, I had no idea how much you'd changed my life. You've brought light into our world, Emily, into mine and the kids. You've shown me that it's okay to hope again, to dream again, and I love you. I think I have for a while now." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened, her heart swelling with joy. "Tom," she whispered, reaching for his hand, "I love you too. So much. You've given me a second chance at life, a chance to heal, to trust, to be happy. I can't imagine my life without you either." Their lips met in a tender kiss, sealing the promise they'd made to each other, to stand by one another, through thick and thin, for as long as they lived. In the months that followed, Emily moved into Tom's home, officially becoming a part of their family. Together, they celebrated milestones big and small, the kids' school achievements, birthdays, holidays, and quiet evenings spent playing board games or watching movies. Life wasn't perfect. They still faced challenges, financial struggles, and occasional disagreements, but they tackled everything as a team, leaning on each other for strength. Looking back, Tom realized that stopping to help a stranger on a rainy night had set off a chain reaction he could never have predicted. That single act of kindness had led him to Emily, who had become his partner, his confidant, and the missing piece in their family puzzle. And for Emily, meeting Tom had been the answer to prayers she hadn't even known she was praying. Their story wasn't one of grand gestures or dramatic twists. It was a testament to the power of compassion, trust, and love. Through ordinary moments shared between extraordinary people, they had created something truly remarkable. A life built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and endless possibility.